Does anyone have any comments for what you did today? Anybody cook one of the new recipes? No. Okay. Just wondered how it turned out for you. Tonight, what you're having is you have the recipes, and the first one is muesli. How many of you have had muesli before? Muesli is served cold, and so it's a great recipe if you've got to go somewhere tomorrow and you don't have time to fix a hot breakfast. Well, the night before, you fix muesli and grab it out of the refrigerator and take it on the road.
I was under the impression that it was dry. I've always just been eating it dry and it's supposed to be wet.
I'm not an expert, but I've always had it wet. But I have seen where you can buy it.
Like where you get it and put, almond milk on it.
Right. And usually you soak it a little while so that the things can soften up. But this one, you dextrinize the oats first if you want to, and that gives it a little more different flavor than just using the oats plain. A lot of people are concerned that muesli, you're eating raw oatmeal. Are you eating raw oatmeal? No, you're not eating raw oatmeal. Do you know how they make oats, how they make rolled oats? First, they take the oat berry, which is what we want you to eat. They steam it so it's nice and moist, and it plumps up nice and fat, and then they put it through a steel roller and mash it flat. And then they put it in an oven and dry it out. So it's partially cooked already. And so it's not raw. And I think the muesli is fun, but I want to confess to you that this is a very rich recipe. Did you see the other ingredients? It's got that coconut oil. No, it doesn't have coconut oil, it has coconut milk. And not too much, and it has some pineapple juice, and then a banana, some salt, and you blend that all up, pour it on your dry oats, and then let it sit until just before you serve it, you stir in all those fruits that you spent time cutting, lovingly cutting. How many of you have a fruit bowl at home? And it sits there with apples and oranges and bananas and maybe mangoes, but how many of you have noticed when the family left home to go to work or go to school that all that fruit was still in the fruit bowl? But if you cut even an apple and slice it or whatever, it will be gone. They love it when they bite into it. But to just take a whole apple, they're not going to do it. So take time, prepare some fruit so people will eat it because they need lots of fruit. And this takes 4 cups of fresh fruit, and you can choose the fruit. I did add a can of pineapple tidbits and a can and fresh apple and fresh orange and fresh apple. And so that's my favorite way to serve it. But it's such a rich dish, and even though it's breakfast, we don't serve it real often. It's a special treat. The sunflower loaf that you had, as you can see from the recipe, is mainly water and sunflower seeds and seasonings. And then you blend those up, and then you have a big bowl and you mix. Well, you don't have to mix. You can either have rice or you can have oats. I just happen to like both together. So I take half of the required rice and half of the required oats and put them in a bowl and then do that. But what really happens is it only made that one tray, and I do it thin because when it's left over, it's a fabulous sandwich for tomorrow. It's not going to be left over. I doubled the recipe for that one tray, so that gives you an idea of how much it will make. It does freeze well after it's cooked, so you can keep it for later. So that's an easy one. But like I told you, I like to always have brown rice cooked on hand. and it goes in so many things. It went in your gravy. You take the almond rice gravy, you take a cup of hot water, and if you happen to have cooked potatoes lately, save the water off your potatoes. It has lots of nutrients in it. Put it in a glass measuring cup, put a cup of water in the microwave with your half cup of already cooked rice that you have left over because you were thinking ahead and cooked extra, and get hot water and hot rice. Put that in the blender with some almonds. If you don't have toasted almonds, you just take a third of a cup of almonds, put them in a nonstick skillet or any skillet, and just shake them around a little bit while they toast over the hot burner. And so put your almonds, everything goes in the blender. A half a teaspoon of salt, onion powder, and chicken-style seasoning. Blend. Because the water and the rice was hot, what's in your blender is now hot. You take that blender and put it in a gravy boat and take it right to the table. No cooking. You don't have to thicken. Doesn't have wheat in it. It's gluten-free. So it's a really fast gravy when you need a fast gravy, but very nutritious, and I find very tasteful. Then the last thing you had today was rice, black bean, and avocado salad. I just love that salad. You do have to drain your beans. Now, don't you hate dumping all those nutrients off of your beans? So put them in a jar, put the juice in a jar, save it for when you make a vegetable soup or something and add it to that. But you do have to drain the beans, and they recommend rinsing them so that you don't discolor the rest of your salad, like your rice. It also has cooked rice, another reason to cook extra rice. But you can or cannot rinse. It's entirely up to you how it's going to look. So then you have the 2 cups of cooked black beans. You have a cup of brown rice, some onion. It calls for red onion. I didn't have it, so you got white. I went light on the onion because I didn't know if anybody had a problem with raw onion. I'm sorry if you do. And by the way, onion and garlic, raw onion and garlic, have quercetin in them. This is something we're told is really good if you're going to be battling COVID. So eat those onions and garlic. The tomatoes are chopped and bell pepper. Now, I used colored bell pepper. I bought the storyline, and I don't have a way to vet it, but I'll try, that a green pepper is an immature fruit. And if it's left on the vine long enough, it will start to turn a color. And a lot of people that we have met say, I can't eat pepper, can't eat bell pepper. And we say, well, try the colored ones because they are more ripe. And we haven't found people having a problem with colored ones that did have problems with green ones. So much as I grew up eating green stuffed peppers and loved the flavor, I found I like it just as well with colored ones. So that's why you're not getting any green peppers in this class. And then you have your chopped avocados. So you have to think ahead because you want your avocados to be ripe when you make this dish. The black olives sliced and the cilantro. Is anybody here doesn't like cilantro? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You didn't taste it? I probably didn't have enough in it, but I'm glad. The cilantro, John can't handle it. He can smell it. I can take it out and start chopping it, and he smells it. He goes, cilantro in the house. On NPR, they did a documentary, and John, you'll have to explain it because I don't say it right, but some of us have the receptacle in our nose to smell it sooner than others. If you smell it sooner than anybody else, you probably are the one that doesn't like it. but I don't smell it as soon as he does. And it makes him nauseous. He wants to like it.
So the reason that those of us who it doesn't taste good, smell it first, is they discover there's 2 different molecules in cilantro that we can taste. And the small molecule is the one that I have a receptor on my tongue for. And the other people have a receptor not for that, but for the bigger molecule. And as you know from chemistry, the little molecules spread faster than the big ones.
Thank you. I knew you'd help me out. I thought it's in his nose. It's in his tongue. So anyway, if you don't like cilantro, don't let anybody tell you that, well, you need to eat it so you can learn to like it, because it is physiologic. You are okay. You are perfectly okay. In fact, you can tell them, I have the receptor for the finer molecules than you do. Yes, I've heard that too. But I do love it. I just think it's the greatest thing. And it is super, super cleansing. It's a wonderful cleansing food. So, and then lemon and lime juice and salt. You see, that's the only thing that's in there for seasoning is the lemon, the lime, and the salt. But I do like to use fresh lemon, fresh lime, and fresh salt. And so that's that. Tomorrow night will be our last night, and we'll have something real special for you. And so, unless there are any questions, I'm going to turn the time over. Okay? Glad you're here.
Thank you. Here, let's leave that in case somebody has questions or something. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so good evening. So, at the end, I think, we shouldn't tell Sally this, but I think I'll have a little survey tomorrow night, and you can just tell us which of the samples were some of your favorites, okay? And I won't ask you right now. All right, so what I did was I've handed out, I think, let me just call a couple names, because I don't know every face yet. So I've handed out all of those lifestyle assessment that for the people who are here. So is Roger Anderson? He's not here, is he? Okay. And I know Matthew and Talara are not here. Catherine Jensen? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know why I thought you were Karen. That must be your sister. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Could I get the medical papers back?
Yes, ma'am. That's right. And what about Handel Smith? Okay. I think he was working our media. Yeah, he's not here tonight. Good. I'm glad to know that Okay. I'll get you, Catherine, I'll get that to you a little later. All right. So what I want to do is I want to go over this with you. And those of you who didn't get one done, I think you'll find it very interesting and useful. So let me just bring up this. Did it actually turn itself off? So first I want to explain to you that some of you didn't get a blood test, okay? Some of you got one of the blood tests that we gave, and some of you brought blood work in. So we tried to put it all together. And some of you, we didn't get blood pressure on. And some of you, we didn't get a height. And so it's, unfortunately, some things are missing. I've never actually done this before with a group like this. This is what I use in my lifestyle intervention treatment program. And I give you one at the beginning, and then after the 10 days, we give you another one so you can see that it shows the change. So this was a little different. I was trying to give you something that would help you assess the risk, because people are always wanting to know, well, why is my cholesterol high? I'm a vegetarian or whatever it might be. And so that's what this is hopefully going to help you understand. Now, because when things are missing, you'll see these strange, like pound signs on some of the pages, because there's nothing there to work with. All right, the other thing I wanted to show you is each of you should be able to identify which one of those columns is you but nobody else, because the only thing that's showing there is a birthday. And so if you can find your birthday, you could, those of you who had a blood test from us. Now, if you brought your own lab work in, I didn't put you on here. But what I want to show everyone is, this is color-coded, right? So just like your report so red is something that needs attention. The sooner the better, more or less. And the orange, or whatever color that seems to be to you, that is elevated. That you should work on that. Then there's a lighter color, and still, what would you call that? Tan. And that's a little above normal. The green, look at all that green you've got. The green is in the optimal range. And then there's, up at the top, do you see some of these are pink, sort of? Those are numbers that are what we might call extreme. Okay, it's not harmful, and you see quite a few of them that are on the creatinine. Many of you have a lower creatinine level than is in the reference range, and I told you that was going to happen because many vegetarians, especially people that are totally plant-based, the creatinine levels tend to run low. And do you remember I said that was perfectly okay, nothing to worry about, unless you have something going wrong with your body. But if everything is normal, that's good. Okay, so I want to focus on the red, because that's the things that need, and you'll be able to find your numbers on your own reports. So if we start off with the blood urea nitrogen to creatinine ratio, there's 3 people that have a high enough number that makes us think that you're not getting well hydrated. Now maybe you just came in from a long hike in the Sahara that just before you had your blood test, and we understand it. But if that's not the case, you probably ought to be drinking more water. By the way, did you know, since, no, I won't say that. But anyway, do you know that there are beverages that you can drink that instead of hydrating you, they actually dehydrate you, right? Like coffee, for example. Anyway, so don't try to hydrate with those kind of beverages. In fact, frankly, alcohol has a tendency to dehydrate you rather than hydrate you. So
Is that mainly caffeinated?
I don't know if there's a difference between decaffeinated and caffeinated or not. I haven't seen data on that.
No, I wasn't asking
Oh,
about decaffeinated. I was just saying, is it mainly caffeinated drinks
Oh,
that you're referring to?
no, I'm referring specifically to, in this case, to coffee. I don't know that like, for example, I don't know if you took just caffeine, pure caffeine, if it would have the same effect. I'm sorry. That's a great question. I need to find the answer. Okay, thank you. There you got it. Thank you very much, Dr. Carlos. Okay. Then, coming on down, what's the next row that's got a red number? Cholesterol, total cholesterol. So there's a couple of reds. Okay, 275. 275 is definitely too high. Okay, and you'll see on your report on the second page. See, the first page you have 3 pages there. The first page really looks at your habits, the foods that we ask you about, and it marks them, helps you see which ones you would be good if you could change, and your exercise and so on. But then the second page is a list of key risk factors for heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. It doesn't list all of the labs. It lists some key ones. And you'll see it has a little chart, a little graph there. And so this will be in the red, okay? And it helps you understand where your risk level is. But notice, like right here is one that's interesting. It's a orangish color at 237. So that's elevated. That needs attention as well, but not as big of a concern as the other ones that are higher. All right, next, coming on down. So you get the gist of it. What do we got here? Looks like the most red is in this row. What is that row? Yeah, so this is the so-called bad cholesterol. And this is, so I don't know, maybe a third of you who got reports had somewhere between a third and a half. You need to work on getting the cholesterol down. So that's good that you're here, because we've been talking to you about how you could do that. And what I want to tell you is that this particular lifestyle assessment is part of my EMR for my lifestyle medicine specialty practice, and it integrates. I mean, it'll before it tells you what the risk is, it'll look at everything from what the lab value is to whether you're taking a medicine or 2 or 3 medicines for that, what your weight is. It looks at so many factors before it says, okay, this is where your risk is. So it's very comprehensive in its assessment. The other thing it does is some of you will find that you've marked some foods that you eat, so many servings a week, and on your report, it's saying that you should decrease that. You should not eat so much of that. And your neighbor is eating more than you are, and it doesn't say anything. Well, we have people here who need to gain some weight. I know that's rare, but we do have some that the assessment says you would be better off to gain some pounds. Most of us, of course, it tells us it would be good to lose a few pounds. So, I mean, I'm just helping you to understand. If you compare your stuff to others, it's not just because it's, what would it be, shellfish. It doesn't automatically condemn all shellfish. But if you're running high cholesterol, it's going to say that would be a good food to try cutting out if you want to cut down on your cholesterol. All right. And then what? There's one down here. Okay. Now this one is vitamin D, right? That row, vitamin D. Right here. So it starts off, here's someone that's just a little over 100. And so it's in the pink. They say that the range is up to 100 is the reference range. But as I've understood it, I'm not heard of toxicity developing at that number. It's got to be considerably higher. But nonetheless, it's marking it as above 100. But here's one that's red. And so this is under 20. And the pretty well accepted standard is, forgot to tell my computer not to go to sleep, didn't I? Is that between under 20 is deficient, between 20 and 30 is insufficient, and above 30 is generally considered okay. So the range you're aiming for is between 30 and 100. Okay, we talked about a lot of this last night as well. And then the vitamin B12. I'm really happy to see that there's nobody in this group that has a number that's low. You're all doing well. Here's someone that's taking a little more than they need. But there's no problem, because with vitamin B12, it's water soluble. So if you take too much, it just goes into the sewer system, because your kidneys get rid of it. Not with vitamin D. See, vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, so you can't just excrete the extra. Anyway, we're good. Over here, somebody has even more. And again, there's no harm to that, but it is more than you need. You're probably just wasting some money, is all. All right? And then the liver enzymes on these were good. There's a couple that are a little elevated, but not anything. That's the light green. So that's as a group, where you stand. All right, so now what I want to do is I want you to look at the very first page, please, and I'm going to explain a couple of very specific things. So I'm sorry we didn't have color to print these. When I email you your report, it is in color, okay? And so you'll get a copy in the email if you've given us your emails, and you'll be able to see it. But if you look on the very first page, down at the bottom right, there's a little box. And in that little box, I should get somebody else to say, there's a legend, if we will, that tells you what the colors mean, but I've just explained them to you on here. So the bottom says danger, and that you can look at your report and see some of these things are red, the dark color, and those are the ones you should pay the most attention to. So it might be that if you're overweight and have high cholesterol, and you really happen to like cheese, it'll probably flag even if you're only having 1 or 2 servings a week. Do you know one of the key things that you need to do? This will illustrate my point using this one example. But if you need to lose weight and to drop your cholesterol, what would be, and you're eating, let's say you're eating some of everything. So everything's is available in this, answer this question. What would be the one thing that might be the most productive change in your weight and cholesterol if you just changed the servings of one food? Give me a couple of examples. What did you say? Oh, that would be to increase, right? Yeah, but what I'm saying, I was thinking actually you were going to name foods that we would drop, but you're talking about one that we would increase. Okay, so I agree with her. Salad would be a good one to increase, but it's not going to be flagged as red. See, so the ones that are going to be flagged in red are the ones that you need to decrease. So thank you. That's a good answer. But now just tell me about some that you. Cheese, meat. Yes. You guys, we don't have it on here. Yes, ice cream, more so than sugary desserts, because fat has how many calories per gram? 9. And how many does carbohydrate have? 4. Yeah, and alcohol 7. So you could get, I get more bang for my buck, I feel like, by reducing the amount of fat that I eat, because I've got some extra weight. It'd be good I could stand to lose 5 or 10 pounds, and I think I would be at a better, I won't go into the details, but anyway, we almost all need to lose some weight. It would be helpful.
Question.
Yes, Betty.
A few years ago, one of my brothers told me that he lost 15 pounds by cutting one thing out of his diet, and that was ice cream.
Yes.
He ate quite a lot of ice cream before, but he cut it out totally, and over a period of 3 months, he lost 15
Yeah. Well, yes, if I cut out all the ice cream I'm eating, I wouldn't lose anything, because I don't eat any ice cream. But I do eat, I've got a sweet tooth, but I don't eat ice cream. I like to eat, let's see, what's the richest, where's Sally, my helper? But anyway, I'm trying to think, anyway, I don't work on the carbohydrates. I'm good with carbohydrates. I work on fats, because I like to get 9 calories per gram for my whatever denial I use. So really, it's true. I've gotten in this habit. I'm very comfortable with it. I'm not telling you need to do it. I'm just illustrating how you can approach this information. And that is, I decided I would get more bang for my buck if I just avoided the higher fat foods at the meal. And most people don't even notice that I'm doing anything different. And so if I see something that is obvious to me, it's high fat or free fat, I just eat something else instead. And so, I'm about 6 pounds lighter than I was when I graduated high school. However, I'm a little bit shorter, so my BMI is, anyway. So, but these are, I think of this like a toolkit, okay? I mean, I've had some people that it seemed like the whole thing is almost all red or orange, and they're like, I'm not, I said, well, just start at the beginning, it's like anything else. It's like, I don't know if any of you guys or girls have a toolkit, but when you go out to work on a project and you're not sure exactly what you're going to need, you can either run back and forth to the shed a half a dozen times, or you can take the whole toolbox with you, and then you've got it. So this is like the toolbox, and you just use the part that works for you, that you're interested in, okay? All right. One other thing I'll point out to you is down at the bottom, underneath that little box that says personal recommendations for achieving your goals. Those of you who gave us 2 goals, we have put just a very brief dot, 3 or 4 things, like whole plant foods, 30 plus minutes of exercise daily, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So that's just like a broad schema of the kind of thing that your doctor might tell you in the office visit when the time is short, and they can only just give you a real quick, cut down on, what did I say? Whole plant foods. By the way, let me ask you a question. Do you know what whole plant foods are? I'm gonna wager that most of you don't actually know what whole plant foods are. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you that. I'm going to say, what does Michael Pollan say? Our whole plant foods. Do you know who Michael Pollan is by any chance? He's the one that wrote the book, a couple of books. He wrote the book In Defense of Food, and he wrote the book The Omnivore's Dilemma. Well, I mean, I love them. They're just so informative. He's one of these guys that, I mean, I learned more about the food system and corn growing in Iowa than I ever knew in my life reading his book about the I think it was In Defense of Food. And but anyway, his bottom line is at the end of the book he says, okay, three rules for good diet. One of them, eat food. And he has an asterisk. He says, mostly plants. Now, why did he even say that? Because after you read the book, you realize that so much of what's in the grocery store shelves is food-like substances. And much of ice cream, much as we love it, because there's another book out. What is it? Fat, Salt, and Sugar, or Fat, Sugar, and Salt. What's the name of the? I didn't understand you. I'm sorry. Anyway, so this gentleman has written this book. Anyway, and here's what they've discovered. The food scientists have been studying in a very rigorous way for many years how to make food super palatable, or they also call it sometimes hyper palatable. It's like, remember I'm going to tell you the little byline, and you tell me what food it is. It says, nobody can eat just one. So, anyway, well, there's others, but the point is, well, there's a couple of them. Pringles is one of them that says nobody can eat just one. You know, Pringles, they are not potato chips, right? You know that. They're potato starch held together fat held together with potato starch. They are not potato chips. And if you look at the fat content, it's huge. It's like 60%, isn't it, I think? Anyway, so the point I'm making right now, remember the question I asked that I went off on the spiel, was I said, you probably don't know what whole food is. Because we think whole grain flour is whole food. Well, it sounds like it's whole wheat flour. But when we talk about whole food, we're actually wanting you to eat it intact. So what does that mean? It means that you really want to eat the wheat as a wheat berry, if to the extent possible. So that's why, which is more healthy? Which would be more whole then, in the definition I'm using? Okay, would it be oat flour? Would it be oat meal? Or would it be steel-cut oats? Or would it be oat groats? So oat groats are more unfiddled with. They're more intact. But if you steel cut them, you're making it as smaller pieces, but that still will not raise your blood sugar as fast as if you use oat flour in something. Because when the food we take in is already pulverized, our body will turn that into sugar fast. And here's the thing, many of us have insulin resistance. We'll talk about that here a little bit more here in a little while, about diabetes. But if I have insulin resistance, my pancreas is sluggish. So when I eat some things that are quickly digested, it sends a signal to my pancreas, hey, we're getting some glucose buildup. We need insulin. And my pancreas slowly wakes up. If I have insulin, it's like that. I realize it's not. But if you have insulin resistance, it's like your pancreas is asleep and it doesn't wake up quickly. And so what happens? By the time the pancreas kicks in, your sugars are quite high and it overshoots the mark. And the next thing you know, you're hungry. And you want something to eat because your sugar is too low. Yeah, we know this is what happens. So you need to make it so that your food calories are digested and absorbed more slowly. And that gives your little tired pancreas a chance to keep up with you. Okay? Anyway, and so one of the easiest ways to make food digest more slowly is fiber. Betty.
Tell me how to lower your LDL cholesterol.
Yes, take statins, right? Well, that'll do it for most people. But no, I'm take statins. Anyway, but those of you who that's either you're allergic to it, there are people allergic, or for whatever reason you don't want to use a statin, you need to look at your diet. But look at your first page, and look at the foods that are. See, this computer is smart enough to know which of those foods have cholesterol in them and which ones don't. And it will point out to you, if your cholesterol is quite high, it'll point out to you the ones that you could cut. So that's part of it, is cutting out cholesterol in your diet. But the other thing is going to flag is saturated fats and trans fats, because those stimulate your liver to make the cholesterol. So to ask that question, Betty, I can't tell you, because I don't know. I'd have to go look at I haven't memorized each one of you and what your lifestyle is like and what the issues are. So, but in general, the average person on the planet, we need to cut down. I mean, I don't know how many patients that I've worked with, and they say, well, my cholesterol is high, and I'm taking a lot of statins. I really don't like that. I like to get away from that. And I say, well, I look at their diet and I say, how much cholesterol are you eating? Now, I will tell you that the amount of cholesterol you eat is not the biggest impact, but it is a significant impact. And they've never even thought about it. Here's somebody taking statins, and they're not even thinking about whether I'm consuming cholesterol or not. Or they're not even thinking about, am I eating saturated fat? Because we know that stimulates. So anyway, we could go on and on about it, but we talked about it some last night when we talked about, night before, heart disease. So do you have any more specific questions? Okay. We can talk one-on-one if you want to talk about your specific situation. And I don't even know if you have high cholesterol. Yes?
What about red yeast?
Red yeast? Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Red rice yeast? Yeah. So red rice yeast is sometimes recommended as a natural. But the thing is, as far as we can tell, the way that red rice yeast works is because of some, quote, natural statins. And they're not titrated. We don't know what kind of amount of statin you're getting, and the rice varies. And so, but yeah, I've heard of people using that, nitokinase, some of these natural things.
And having good results.
Some results, yeah, it helps lower it. But it's not the way to do it. The way to do it, if you can at all, is to make a lifestyle change.
But if it's familial?
If it's familial, it may not have near enough strength. You'll just have to, each case is different. You'll have to work with a doctor to find out what it's going to take to control familial hypercholesterolemia. Lifestyle, I think, is foundational. You need to do that, but you're still probably going to be over what you should be. Yeah, not you. I don't think I saw anyone here that I thought had familial hypercholesterolemia.
Well, I'm only 210.
Yeah.
Cholesterol is 210, but
You could have.
the doctor.
I remember we had a conversation. I remember you.
And I don't eat anything.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you would be the first person I know that does that. I'm half teasing you. But anyway, no, so we can talk about that, because when I talked to you before, I didn't have your numbers, but now we have them, and I could talk specifics. Okay, was there another hand that I saw? Okay. All right, very good. Hello, Rob. Welcome. So, all right, let's go to the second page. I'm still trying to just make sure that you can use this document, okay? So this is the second page. And some of you don't have anything on here for body mass index because we didn't get your weight or we didn't get your height. And I just went ahead and gave you what we did have. But ideally, we would have your weight so we could calculate your BMI. We would have your waist. Did you know that waist circumference alone is a significant indicator of risk for heart disease and for insulin resistance and so on? Yeah, because waist circumference becomes a surrogate measure, in essence, for how much centripetal obesity or how much visceral adiposity that we have. And remember I told you there's two kinds of fat? And the kind that's just under the skin, subcutaneous, is nice because it keeps you warm and soft. But the one that's on the intestines is not good. It's harmful. You want to minimize that. I'll never forget the first time as a student I was watching, in medical school, I was watching a surgery, abdominal surgery. And there was a fairly large person on the operating table, and of course they were all covered with this blue cover, and the doctor had opened up just uncovered the specific part of the abdomen that we were going to need to get into for this surgery. And when he cut through and he got the skin and the subcutaneous layer, it was about, I don't know, an inch or inch and a half thick. And then he cut the peritoneum and stuff came out. I saw that and I thought, my goodness, are we going to be able to get this all back in there before we have to sew it up? And it was some work. It was effort. Well, that's what happens when we have too much abdominal girth. It's pushing. And you know what? This is why losing weight is so important if you want to control gastroesophageal reflux, where acid from your stomach is pushing up into your esophagus. Because if you have this large abdomen, it's pushing up on the diaphragm. It's pushing that stomach acid up. And so, I know people that are, my Spanish friends say they're eating PPIs, proton pump inhibitors. They're eating pills. We would say taking pills. But the point is that if we now know that reducing the amount of acid in the stomach is not actually optimal for health. It might be good to eliminate some of the acid reflux, but we need that acid to digest our food and to absorb some of the vitamins. It may very well be that the PPIs are making us have less absorption of vitamin D, for example. Anyway, so the optimal solution to any problem is try to learn how to change your lifestyle. And don't make a diet. I do not recommend anybody go on a diet. Of course, unless they have something like PKA or some metabolic. But yeah, I want you to make a lifestyle change that is something that you are not doing on a temporary basis. It's something that you adopt permanently. Okay.
Would you have raw Venus paper there? I looked in that file, I didn't see it.
I don't remember him turning in a questionnaire. Did you turn in a? Yeah, so we don't have any. Okay. Unless you turned in. Yeah. So I want to just show you the bottom of this, because there's a reason that this is designed the way it is. There's a reason that on the top, what does it say? What is the heading up there at the top? It says biometric measures, and it gives you all that stuff from your blood tests and so on. And then what does it say on the next half? Lifestyle measures. You do understand that there's a connection, right? What's down here, the lifestyle measures are in general driving what's happening up here. So for most of you, now if you look at these charts, at the bottom there's a line that says average. Do you see that? In research we would call it the mean, but most people don't think that has something to do with attitude. So we're talking about the average for all of these, okay? And then the average down here. In almost all cases where the numbers are too high up here, you'll find that it's even worse down here. So some of you it's not, but in many cases, the lifestyle habits are at higher, are further over. They're higher risk than up here. Now, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, here's an example. Some of you don't have an average, and the reason is because we didn't have complete information to be able to give you an average. I felt like it would be misleading to give you the average when we didn't have everything present. So anyway, that's my point. So down here it talks about how many servings of cholesterol foods are you having a week, how many high-fat, sweets, so forth. And then underneath there's some very important habits. You know they did a study a long time ago. It's so old that you hardly hear about it anymore. But they did a study where they had people eat breakfast, and then they ate just a little bit of food, cracker, donut, candy bar, about every, I think it was every hour, but it was fairly short. All right, they were snacking. And what they discovered was, with careful research, they discovered that at the end of the day, some of the breakfast was still there. So one of the analogies I hear people use, I don't know how perfect it is, but it makes sense in a way, is it'd be like if you start up the laundry and you put a load of laundry in the washing machine, and every 5 minutes you go and put another garment in, and some coveralls and some dirty socks. And I mean, we wouldn't do that. So snacking is a significant factor for gaining weight, for messing with your digestion. And I'll tell you something else that's so interesting. Researchers have actually shown that if you skip breakfast, you will typically snack considerably more than if you eat breakfast. Now, why would that be? Well, what happens is, when you're fasting, you're running on reserve, shall we say. And then by the time you get into your day and you get going, and it's like, okay, I'm famished. I missed breakfast. And so what do you eat? Well, people don't serve breakfast at work at 9 o'clock, but they serve something. They serve donuts or snacks or whatever. So the point is, if you take your own snacks with you, it wouldn't be so bad. If you were taking, like celery and maybe even celery with peanut butter or whatever. But the snacks that we find in the world are not designed for health. They're designed for pleasure, and short-term pleasure, I might add. So that's why you see snacking and eating breakfast as two of the questions we ask. Another one is big suppers. Did you know it's been a while since I was a resident, but I am a new doctor, remember, because I did it late. So I'm a new doctor, but an old guy. And I can still remember very vividly that at the VA hospital, where I did most of my residency, that we knew that somewhere, usually between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., we would see most of the chest pain come into the hospital. Because they had a nice supper. I mean, I used to live that way. The only real meal I ate at one point in my life was supper. And it might be 10 o'clock before I could get around to supper. But I had a good supper. And then I sat down in the easy chair and watched Johnny Carson. Oops, I gave away my age, didn't I? Anyway, and then I'd go to bed. Well, if I was older, I probably would have had chest pain and a heart attack. But I was young. And then I found out about health, thank God, while I was still in my 20s. And decided that I need to make some changes. So where I'm going with this is big suppers are not the way to go. Yes? Janet?
Medical people sometimes tell people to eat 6 small meals a day instead of regular 3 meals a day.
Yeah, that's a great question. So do you know the kind of people that typically are given that advice, by the way? Or do you know any? Yeah, it's not typically people with heart disease, although it might. But it's more for controlling their blood sugar. And the idea behind it is, yes, I do know why they do that, and I know how it works. And it does work. And that is what they're trying to do is they're trying to level out the blood sugar in the daytime. Remember when I said that if you have a sluggish pancreas and you eat a meal, and then the pancreas wakes up too late and okay? So we don't want those swings like that. We want it more even. So if you eat 6 times a day, a smaller amount, you can just keep that blood sugar more even. But just let me finish. Well, let me just finish my thought, and then you can. And so, but that's a problem, okay? It's physiologically and metabolically causing difficulties. It's actually been shown that it's exacerbating the problem. It's making the pancreas less able to handle things, and you become more dependent on having that kind of a eating pattern. There's actually a study published showing that eating 2 meals a day is superior at controlling blood sugar after, in the long term, 6 months, say, than 6 times a day. So anyway, so does that answer your question? And then you wanted to make a statement or something else?
But if they're eating 6 meals a day, their food is not totally digested.
That's exactly correct. And they have to eat small amounts. If you eat 6 meals a day, you'll be, you'll be so big you can't get in the door. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say that when the pancreas secretes the insulin that you need, if the cells are coated with cholesterol, the insulin cannot go into the cells to do the work. So that really acts against the cholesterol, high cholesterol acts against the fat.
Yes, there is definitely a connection between the cholesterol and the blood sugar control. It's true. Okay. All right, go to the last page now, and then I'm going to finish with this description, and we'll have a little break, I think. Is that clock right? No. Okay, so on the last page, it's actually, this is all coming from those 2 questionnaires you filled out. The Beck questionnaire that was front and back about, it's a screening test for depression. And then the other one was the SF-36 that had 3 pages, 36 questions. Well, it turns out that those tests, those questionnaires, not tests, they are been designed in such a way that they can tell you your relative quality of life in 8 different or 9 different areas. So the first one is physical functioning. And notice that 0 is low and 100 is high. So if you have 10, then you have low physical functioning based on your own answers to the questions, okay? If you have 90, you have a high physical function, and so on. You can see the other ones, limitations to physical health, energy levels, and so on. And then there's one that we've added is total score. So we average those numbers, the 8 of them, to give you what's sort of more or less your average score. We also show right underneath there the number of blanks. Some of you may have not known the answer and just left it, or I think some of you got distracted. Somebody interrupted you and you didn't get to finish it. So it'll tell you the more questions that you leave blank, the little less accurate the questionnaire is. And then below that is the depression score, and this shows you also how many questions are missing on that where it says questions left blank. The simplest score here to understand, I think, is we standardize it to 100. So your first score is 0 would be maximum depression, and 100 would be no depression. But if you really, the raw score is the one that is commonly used to categorize this. And there's a couple of you that your score is in the severe range, above 28. And don't be surprised if I come and speak to you just briefly to make sure that you know that's the case and suggest how you might do something about it. I will tell you this while I'm talking about it. Of all the things that change in my lifestyle immersion program, the thing that changes more than anything is severe depression. It drops dramatically with a positive experience at making lifestyle changes and seeing your cholesterol come down, your blood pressure come down, your blood sugar come down. It's really encouraging. The other thing that comes down really well, or improves greatly, it actually goes up, is the SF-36 score. So, anyway, that's what this is, okay? This is what the 3 pages are about. What Dr. Kathy and I are talking about doing, and I think we're going to be able to do it, is when you get your next blood test, what day is that? March 30th. Okay, good little kittens. So on March 30th, we're going to also have another set of questionnaire you can fill out. So you can fill out, okay, for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, however long that is, what have I been doing exercise? What have I been eating? And that'll help you to assess what the effects of the changes you've made. If you haven't made any changes, then probably your blood work won't change very much. But if you make some changes, I can almost guarantee that you'll see some improvements. All right. That was a lot. And we have time to watch our video and discuss it, but why don't we take 5 minutes, okay? So I want you to get up if you can. It still feels good out there. Go outside because that gets you some fresh air and moving around. And then we'll come back in about 5 minutes or so. So, oops, let me turn this off. All right, let's see if we can get this video to work. Can we find our seats? And yes. So we're going to talk about diabetes here in this video, and then we're going to have some, I just want to see, okay. I like Dr. Andrea, but we're going to skip past that and go right to the lecture. Okay. There you go, yeah.
Question: what is most closely related to the development of diabetes? Are you ready to go with me to Colorado and take a look? Let me take you there to the St. Louis Valley Study. Here, researchers tracked 134 people for 3 years who were not diabetics yet, but they were on their way. They were pre-diabetics. Their question was, what drives these pre-diabetic people to become full-blown diabetics? Is it the amount of sugar and carbohydrates that most people are worried about, or is it something else? Here's what the researchers found. They found that a daily 40-gram increase in fat, that's about the amount of fat in a bag of potato chips, increased the risk of becoming diabetic by 6 times. So fats may play a role here, doesn't it? They proposed then that fat may be a major player. They believe that it alters cell membranes, which in turn may affect the signal transduction across those membranes and thus decreasing insulin sensitivity. Could it be the fat gumming up the cellular keyholes? Or could it be the calorie overload, where fat, of course, plays a major role as the most calorie-dense nutrient? Let's go to Harvard and see if they can help us. Here, the famous Nurses' Health Study found over a period of 16 years, 3,300 new cases of diabetes out of a pool of 85,000 nurses. They analyzed the data and they found that 91% of these new cases were directly attributable to lifestyle choices. It wasn't so much genetics, it was 91% lifestyle issues. Diabetes then was not so much a disease of genetics as it was a disease of lifestyle choices. And among those lifestyle choices, nothing was more powerful than the amount of overweight. Listen to this. Comparing those at the highest weight with those at the lowest weight yielded a 40-fold relative risk differential. Did you get that one? 40-fold, 40 times more diabetes at the upper end when compared to the lower end. Weight, overweight. Well, let's see what we can learn from the famous diabetes prevention program called the Dpp Study. Here they explore the questions of drugs, in this case metformin, or lifestyle. They took 3,000 some obese pre-diabetics at 27 centers, divided them into 3 treatment groups, and tracked them for 3 years to watch for the clinical outcomes. Which group would have the most diabetics? Group 1 was a control group receiving placebo as the dummy pills. Group 2 received the drug metformin, and Group 3 received intensive lifestyle intervention with the goal of losing 7% of excess weight and to walking 150 minutes a week. And here you see the outcomes over the 3-year period. You see the 3 groups. Group number 1, placebo. 29% of these pre-diabetics turned over the next 3 years into diabetics. That's 29%. Then group number 2 on medication, you would expect fewer diabetics now, right? And that's exactly what happened. Only 22% of these people turned into diabetics. And then group number 3, the intense lifestyle program, here only 14% of the pre-diabetics became diabetics, which means it was a 58% greater benefit than those who did not use any medications and were on the placebo. This finding has also been validated by the recent report from the Adventist Health Study. This study has been tracking some 60,000 people in North America in this particular study, where some were strict vegetarians and others were meat eaters. Here's what they found. They found that the meat eaters carried considerably more weight, and they also had 250% more diabetes. A most compelling question then would be, what is causing the diabetes? Well, actually, 3 diet and diabetes studies at Harvard have been tracking 200,000 people for a decade. And what did they find? They found that the daily use of 4 ounces of unprocessed red meat, you know, that's steak and pork or hamburgers, increased the diabetes risk by 20%. They also found that the daily use of only 2 ounces, I mean, that's about 60 grams of processed red meat like bacon, hot dogs, or sausages, increased the diabetes risk by 50%. But when they replaced 1 daily serving of those processed meat with a whole grain dish, the diabetes risk dropped by up to 35%. Think of it. Just imagine replacing some processed meat with some whole grain dish, 35% drop in the risk of diabetes. Amazing, isn't it? What could make the difference? The Harvard researchers proposed 3 possible mechanisms for the greater diabetes risk. They suggested, number 1, it could be related to the weight gain. Number 2, it could be the toxic effect of the nitrosamines on the insulin-producing pancreatic cells. And number 3, it could be the oxidative stress and inflammation related to the kind of iron in meat and the way it is prepared. Now, to summarize, diabetes has increased and reached epidemic proportions. Its clinical and cost consequences are devastating, but we can do something about it. Diabetes is not inevitable. It doesn't have to be the death sentence that people fear. Many studies, after all, now suggest that a lifestyle change can help us to prevent diabetes. What we need to do is move away from energy-dense foods high in fat and sugar and low in fiber, and to move towards a more natural diet, more whole foods, more plant foods, low in fat and high in fiber.
I have seen and cared for many patients with diabetes over the years. And based on that experience, I'd like to share some insights with you in regards to living with this condition. Often, getting the diagnosis of diabetes can be overwhelming, especially for younger patients below the age of 30, but for older patients as well. In many cases, the reaction is one of denial or avoidance. Try and accept that you have the condition so that you can deal with it effectively. I have had patients admit to me that they have experienced not only denial, but crying spells, anger, resentment, and sadness. However, it's best to acknowledge and accept the reality in order to address it. Next, knowledge is power. It's really crucial that you educate yourself about diabetes by reading about it, attending diabetic teaching classes, and asking questions. Make sure you read from credible sources because much of the information on the internet is blog and opinion. Also invaluable is to talk to individuals who have gone through the same experience and are living successfully with this condition. The more you learn, the better equipped you'll be to take action. As the saying goes, the best defense is a good offense. Next, when blood sugars are high, some individuals have no symptoms, even when blood sugars are as high as 300 or 400. But usually symptoms do occur, and they include frequent urination, feeling thirsty, increased appetite, blurred vision, and feeling tired. Now, these symptoms usually go away once the blood sugars improve. Also, if you're on medicines, especially insulin, please check your blood sugars at least once a day. If blood sugars are in very poor control, you may need to check them up to 4 times a day, before meals and at bedtime, until the blood sugars get under better control. Always write the results down in a logbook for the benefit of you and your doctor. Now, medicines can be stopped at times, but should always be done in partnership with your doctor. Stopping medicines must be replaced by consistent lifestyle habits. In other words, something has to give. It's best to adjust your medicines after the blood sugars come down. Also, you can get instructions from your doctor beforehand on just how to change your medicines based on the blood sugar levels. If you have diabetes, there are 4 special things that you need to take special care and be aware of. And they are, first of all, your heart health. Remember that cardiovascular conditions are what cause most of the problems for those with diabetes. So be aware of what your cardiac risk factors are. Prevent them where possible, and control them if you already have them. Second is your kidney function. This needs to be checked at least twice a year and can be done by a simple urine test because, as you know, diabetes commonly affects the kidneys. Third is your eyes. Get an eye exam at least once a year to check for damage due to diabetes. Fourth is your feet. Protect them. Avoid calluses, injuries, and ill-fitting shoes because poor circulation and poor nerve sensation from diabetes can make it all worse. Equipped with proper knowledge, a proactive attitude, and proper lifestyle habits, you can be a winner when it comes to dealing with your diabetes.
You know, we talked about preventing diabetes, but what about, is there actual evidence that type 2 diabetes could be turned around, could be disarmed, maybe even reversed? Let me take you on a tour to 7 research centers that have dealt with that very question. Here's evidence number 1. Let me take you all the way back to 1933 to Montreal, Canada, where Dr. Israel Rabinovich instructed 100 insulin-using diabetics to eat a very low-fat diet. You know, that diet contained only 20% of the calories in fat, which is about half what we eat nowadays. And he found that within weeks, 24 of his 100 patients were off their insulin injections, and their blood sugars had normalized. It was an incredible early finding, isn't it? And then evidence number 2, only a year later, a very distinguished English physician by the name of Sir Harold Himsworth was able to show in many controlled experiments that the more fat in the diet, the lower the patient's sensitivity to insulin. That is to say, that the higher the dietary fat, the lower the insulin's ability of moving glucose from the bloodstream into the cells. He found that the blood sugar levels changed in response to the amount of fat in the diet. And here is evidence number 3, 1955. A physician by the name of Inder Singh is trying to see if he could confirm the work done in the early years in Montreal and London. And so he took 80 insulin-using diabetics and he prescribed them a simple 11% fat diet. You know, 11%, that's even much less than what's used before. And of course, he combines that with natural foods. So with lots of beans, lentils, whole grains, and fruits and vegetables. And here are his results. Within 6 weeks, 50 of his 80 patients were off insulin. And another 18 were off insulin in 18 weeks. You know what that is? That's a success rate of 85%. And that in weeks. Good news, isn't it? Evidence number 4, this time Australia. Here, Dr. Karen O'Day took 10 Aboriginal people who had become urbanized and diabetics and placed them for 7 weeks once more into their more traditional Australian outback to live as hunter-gatherers. With their calories this time coming largely from roots and berries and wild animals, their diet now averaged 1,200 calories a day, and of these, only 13% came from fat. In the process, they lost 18 pounds, which is about 8 kilos, and their average diabetic blood sugars of 209, which is 11.6, dropped to non-diabetic levels of 119 or 6.6 without having to rely on any medication. And how did they accomplish this in just 7 weeks? Here, by following a simple, less refined, more traditional diet with little fat and lots of fiber. Now there's evidence number 5. More recent data from the Predican Longevity Center showed that when they took 864 diabetics and gave them a high fiber diet, very low in fat and cholesterol, consisting largely of, wouldn't you guess it, They took fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans, plus daily walking, and at the end of their 4-week residential lifestyle program, 76% of these type 2 diabetics were off their oral drugs, and 44% were off their insulin. And that's in 4 weeks. Amazing, isn't it? Now, evidence number 6 takes us to Professor James Anderson at the University of Kentucky. On the basis of more than 100 published reports and scientific articles, Dr. Anderson asserted with much eloquence again and again his conviction that many type 2 diabetics could be off their medications if they followed a simpler whole foods diet. For instance, in metabolic wart studies, he took a total of 28 diabetics who were using 14 to 32 units of insulin and placed them on a whole foods diet, simple foods, plant-based, very low in fat, less than 10%, and high in unrefined carbohydrates and fiber. And here's what happened. Within less than 3 weeks, 22 were off their insulin, and the remaining 6 diabetics had their insulin reduced from 28 to 14 units in the same time period. Now that is a breakthrough. Based on his extensive work then, with using high fiber and simple whole food diets in the treatment of type 2 diabetics, he summarized his presentation at the annual Public Health Convention at Loma Linda University in California by stating, with great confidence, he said, 50 to 75% of diabetics on insulin and 80 to 90% of those on pills could normalize their blood sugars and be off medication within weeks if they changed the diet. A true breakthrough. And here's our last piece of evidence, evidence number 7. Let me introduce you to Dr. Neil Barnard, a physician, also founder and president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He showed in several studies funded by the National Institutes of Health that type 2 diabetes indeed responded exceedingly well to a diet very low in fat, but high in fiber, and consisting again of, you guessed it, didn't you? Yeah, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, which was making medication no longer necessary in the majority of his diabetic patients. Perhaps it's time for us to change the rules. Perhaps we need some new rules for the game of beating diabetes. And that is, perhaps fats and refined foods and animal products are out, and whole foods with their rich fiber and nutrient content are in. Maybe we ought to couple that with a daily walk and with close supervision by your physician. Because as you move forward with the CHIP program, you will find that your physician may need to reduce your medication and that your new lifestyle is now becoming your new therapeutic friend with proven results and priceless benefits.
Now, clearly, diet is incredibly important when it comes to diabetes. And the optimal diet is ideal because plant-based whole foods are broken down slowly, so it makes it easier to manage blood sugar levels. And as we've learned, the optimal diet can even help with the underlying causes of diabetes, which means that it can even help with its reversal. And so the takeaway message is that if you're a diabetic, you don't need some special variation of the optimal diet. It's ideal for you just the way it is, just as it is for everyone else. But while diet is incredibly important for the prevention and the management of diabetes, I can't stress enough that so too is physical activity. In fact, the American Diabetes Association say that physical activity is a cornerstone of diabetes care. And then one of the reasons for this is that exercise actually helps improve the effectiveness of insulin within our body. And insulin is very involved in blood sugar level control. How's this? Just one single bout of aerobic exercise can increase the effectiveness of insulin within our bodies for up to 3 days. How's that? And so this is why peak bodies recommend that diabetics shouldn't go more than about 2 days without doing anything aerobically active. Of course, every day is the ideal. But what I also want to say is that we're discovering it's not just aerobic activities that are great for diabetics, it's also resistance exercises. And here I'm talking about exercises that you might use light weights or even just your body weight to perform exercises that work and tone the muscles a little. What we've discovered is that, and this has especially come out from researchers from the Baker International Diabetes Institute, they've discovered is that through regular resistance training, you can actually get the same benefits in terms of blood sugar level control as drug therapies. And for this reason, we actually recommend that diabetics should be involved in resistance training programs at least 2, or ideally 3 times each week. And of course, exercise does more than just help with our blood sugar level control. It also keeps other parts of our bodies healthy as well. And this is really important when it comes to diabetes. For example, it improves heart health. And we know that diabetics are more prone to heart disease. But it also increases your muscle strength and your bone strength, improves your mood, and just makes you all round more functional. And so the takeaway message is essentially that when it comes to diabetes, you can't go past the 2 basics when it comes to best care. That is food and fitness.
So, you know what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to ask you some questions about what we just heard from Dr. Andrea and Dr. Hans and Dr. Darren. Oh, by the way, Dr. Darren, the last one there, the younger fellow, he took me hang gliding when I was over there in Australia. We did tandem hang glide. Boy, was that fun. But anyway, so, and what was interesting, we flew around on over the cliffs near the coast where the wind was coming, and the seagulls were up there flying around too. And so after about 45 minutes, we landed. And so then he ran up the hill back to the car, where the car was. He loves exercise. The guy is really... So, all right, tell me, well, since we're talking about exercise, how many times a week was it that it would be best to have resistance exercise for a diabetic? 2 to 3 times, that's right. And how about this one? How long did a bout of exercise help to lower blood sugars? For as long as 3 days, yeah. So that's why they say, 2 or 3 times a week we should. And of course, ideal is to shoot for every day. Let's see, what else did they talk about? They talked about, did they tell us how much it increases our risk of heart disease, diabetes? Did he give a number? What did he say?
40 times?
It says, yeah, I think you're thinking another thing is 40%. No, he didn't tell us the number, but I know it didn't seem to me he did. I was listening for it. But anyway, the number is 3 to 4 times. 3 to 4 times is generally accepted as the increased risk of heart disease for diabetics. Do you know why that's true or how that works? Or what was the question? Why? Oh. So anyway, the answer is that part of the answer. I don't know all the answers, and I don't know if science has figured it all out. But one of the key things we know is that when you have high blood sugar, it tends to increase the damage to the endothelium and to that inner layer of the blood vessels. And so, when our blood sugars are too high, above what they ought to be, it causes glucose to stick to various molecules and cells in our body. It's called glycation. In fact, that's what the A1C, the hemoglobin A1C test for diabetes, is based on looking at how much glucose is stuck to the red blood cell, and that's how we can estimate what the blood sugars have been. All right, how about you ask each other a question? Somebody ask a question. Yes, Carol.
Brother
fasting mimicking diet, yes.
Right, and then if they did that, I think 3 times, they would actually develop more cells, the pancreas would develop more cells for the patients.
Correct. And they showed that,
Someone that we could get the information to look that up?
yes. In fact, someone else asked me to send those 2 papers to them. I've got it in my notes. So
You can send some, email us some?
I am, and I'm hoping that I'll do that tomorrow. And that would be the handouts for everything, including tomorrow night, and your copy of your report. But anyway, it's Catherine Jensen. Kathy Jensen. Let me just write that. Oops, I don't have a pen. Yeah, so I'll have to put it in my notepad here. Oh, well, thank you for loaning me that pen. All right, would you take that? What I'm going to ask you to do then, I mean, I'm willing to send it. What I'd ask you to do, is that me? Is to, we'll mark it on their, on the list with their email address. So can you do that when they come over to Sally and just put on there a mark that we'll know to send the fasting mimicking? Actually, I mean, probably most of you. It's fascinating, but I don't want to just send it to everybody. And part of the reason is because I am adjunct faculty at Loma Linda, and I have permission to use copyrighted material for teaching, but I can't just distribute it to everybody on the street. So to honor that, if you ask for it as part of this class, I feel justified to share it with you. Okay, continue.
If I remember right, it had like with the fasting that you did for 5 days, they wanted you to do a reduced diet with so much protein, so much carbohydrate,
Yes,
and
so
so much, but I don't know the specifics.
yes, and the articles, of course, will give you those exact details. And the one for human beings, the fasting mimicking diet for humans was actually a little different, and it was 5 days, once a month, and in between, they just ate normally. I mean, hopefully they're eating healthfully, but so yes, it was the first day they cut the calories down to about 1,300, and then after that, I believe it's somewhere around 800 for 4 days. But that's just going on memory. I've got all that data, and I'll be sending that. In fact, that's actually in the handout for the talk on epigenetics, is the numbers, the things you're asking. But then I'll also be, if you have them mark it, we will send you the actual scientific papers. There's 2 of them that have been published on it. What they did, folks, this is why I think it's so earth-shaking. They actually, in the mice, what they call sacrificing, where they killed the mice when they had done this, and took pathological examination of the pancreas and staining, and showed there were more beta cells in that pancreas than there was before. And so the power of epigenetics, we're still learning. It's much more powerful than we probably realize. I'm not telling you that proves that if you go on a fasting mimicking diet that you will have new beta cells. We haven't got that proof yet because we don't have many people to sacrifice and cut open their pancreas. But all the evidence that we have indicates the same thing is happening, but we don't have the absolute proof. Okay, what else? Yes?
Can you gain a benefit by just plain fasting? Does it have to be the fasting mimicking diet?
Fasting is certainly good for health, and we have plenty of animal and human studies indicating that a fasting kind of a diet improves longevity, improves biomarkers. It's in general, fasting is of a modest amount. Now, you can fast until, obviously, it can kill you. So we're not talking about an uncontrolled, unlimited fast. And there are people that before you fast, you should talk to a physician, because I generally tell people, if you're as far as you know, you're healthy, I don't think there's any danger of a 3 to 5 day fast. And I have fasted 5 days myself just to see how that feels. It's actually wonderful after the second day. The hardest time for me was the part of the first day and quite a bit of the second day. After that, it's almost like you say, okay, I don't eat anymore. And it's amazing. It gave me a lot more time. I had at least an hour and a half to 2 hours more time per day. But I'm not suggesting that's a long-term thing. I just wanted to see how it was before I tell people you could try it. I'll just try it myself. The other thing I wanted to say is that it's the difference between fasting and fasting mimicking, Rob, is that with fasting, typically you only drinking water, or some people will have what they call a fruit fast, okay, and so they eat fruit. I don't recommend that you have a fruit juice fast because it's going to have a tendency to counteract some of what you're looking for. It's going to tend to raise your sugars, et cetera. So I don't recommend that. If you want to, but anyway, but a fasting mimicking is not fasting. It's mimicking the beneficial effects of a fast, but with not denying nutrients. So somehow the same effects are not seen with just the fast that they get with fasting mimicking. And I'm not an expert on it yet. I've read those papers about it, but I haven't really become a super expert at what's the difference. Why does it work differently than fasting alone? But it does. It seems that, what is it? It's more like a low food intake period than it is a complete fast. And so, like I said, what we know is that somehow in mice, that 4-day low-calorie, high-nutrient diet causes, after the 3 iterations, it causes more beta cells to be present in the pancreas and a higher insulin production. And the amazing thing to me is it happens in type 1 diabetic mice as well. While I'm speaking of that, one of the interesting things, they've done a lot of research in mice with diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And one of the interesting things they've discovered is that in some cases of type 1 diabetes, I don't know if it's all, but they know now that in some cases of type 1 diabetes, the neurons in the pancreas are causing the beta cells to be stunned and not be able to function. Because they gave mice that had type 1 diabetes that seemed to be mediated by the neurons, they gave them an injection that stunned the neurons, and the mice produced insulin. The beta cells function. So, there's a whole lot of stuff we don't fully understand by any means about human physiology. I find it all fascinating. Did I tell you that the lymph cells in your body have assigned parking in the glands, in the lymph glands? They've done research that they took lymph cells out of animals first, and then in humans they found the same thing, and they labeled them with a sort of like a radio label, something that's not dangerous, but they can read it on a Geiger counter or something, however they did it, and they put them back into the body. We know how to do that. It's like a bypass machine, right? Anyway, and they tracked these cells and found that they go to park next to the same neuron that repeatedly. So there's assigned parking, I call it, and the lymph cells go and park. And the reason I say parking is they don't actually touch, but they're close enough together that the signals that they're sending each other, they can read and understand. And so that made a lot of sense to me why that when you get an infection, let's say you get something in your body that needs the lymph system to fight it, you don't have to wait until that germ circulates over the whole body. Some lymph nodes can send the alert to the nervous system, who sends the alert to all the lymph nodes. So it's like calling up the army. You don't have to have each soldier show up. You can make a radio call and everybody. Anyway, amazing machines we wonderfully made. All right, what else can you tell me about something else that we learned in? Who's Dr. Anderson? What did Dr. Anderson do that was Do you remember his lecture? He said, what percentage of diabetics that were on oral medications could get off of them with change in lifestyle, mostly diet? Yeah, good. Yes, very good. That's right. 75%. Now, what about the number who were on insulin? How many of the people on diabetics on insulin might get off of their insulin? Based on his research and studies, was it higher or lower? It was lower. Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, it was 50%. So my own experience is that, like in the Marshall Islands where we did the research, we only took people who had a hemoglobin A1C of 8 and above. So we were taking poorly controlled, inadequately controlled diabetics into our study. And it's true that the higher the worse the diabetes, the more dramatically it responds to change. And so we were looking for that. We wanted to make sure that we could see our effect. But what I was going to tell you was that when every patient that we had in the study that was on insulin had to stop the insulin. Every one of them. Now, what's interesting is, in America, that might not be true because you can't stop giving insulin if the person has come to where their beta cells can't produce insulin. But it appears that in the Marshallese people, they have very little of that condition, that where if they're not a type 1 diabetic during adolescence or youth, that in adulthood, anyway, we didn't have any. Of course, we only had 165 or so people in our study, we didn't have the whole population. But the point is, it seems that there's most of the adults with diabetes in the Marshall Islands are able to still produce insulin. So we had to take them off of the insulin. They would be too low, their sugars. Okay, let me see where we are. Oh, we're past. I'm sorry, already took 5 minutes of your drive home. Well, anyway, so tomorrow night, we're going to talk about hypertension after we have the samples. I assume the samples are going to be the right kind of food to lower your blood pressure, since we're going to be talking about blood pressure. That's funny. Of course. And it's like, Sally, tell them real quick here, I know that I'm taking their time, but I know they like to hear from you. Tell us which of these recipes would be good for controlling your blood sugar. Oh, he's going to give. It's all of them.
All the ones with beans. But
what we've done is over the years, working with a variety of lifestyle patients, we came to the conclusion it was smarter to have all recipes that we serve suitable for diabetics instead of having to feed the diabetics a different way. Isn't that true?
that's true. But I have given...
Some are even better than others.
Right. I've given you some recipes that if I knew you were a diabetic or a really serious diabetic, I might limit how much I gave you. Like the muesli today. It had, it had a lot of fruit in it, but it had 2 tablespoons of maple syrup or honey. But I knew some of you might be diabetic, and so I didn't put that in there. I put 2 tablespoons of, what do you think? Not stevia. It would be a good choice. I used agave nectar. And you can use agave, but don't use it all the time because it can damage the liver. It's not actually assimilated by the gut. It is assimilated in the liver, and it can damage the liver. So agave is something you can use occasionally, and we do use it occasionally. But it does not spike blood sugar at all. But yes, the high fiber foods, the whole grains at breakfast or whenever. Barley is a good one. Barley is really good. And what else, John? Remind me. I just do it. I don't talk about it. Are you talking about a prepared one or just a natural one? Because even a date is good, but it has fiber if you eat it, fresh or dried. Right. And we think of dates as being really sweet, and they are. I don't know, but what it might raise blood sugar, though. You should take a postprandial walk, and after you eat your date. But you heard him say stroll. It's not, you don't want to do a hike. You want the blood to go to your gut to do the digesting. So you want to just exercise your big muscles gently, gently. A nice stroll.